Page 43 of Guidance Note 3 tells me that if I show the bus bar to the origin of all the circuits by closing all the overcurrent protective devices, not the main switch obviously, I show the bus bar to all the origins of the circuit by closing them. So the bus bar now has continuity with all those brown leads. I can now connect all the origins of those brown cables to all the origins of the CPCs up there. Instead of taking out my line conductor and waygoing it to a CPC individually, I can now take my multifunction tester with probes to the back of my end of line, wherever that may be, ceiling rows. In this instance, I'm going to be looking at my socket radial 2.5mm power circuit. Remember to put your MFT back to, if it's not already there, low resistance ohms, and to clamp these two tightly together with a tight electrical contact in order to null the leads. Let's see if we nulled. There we go, null the leads. So let's now have a look at what we can do from the back of the end of line of our socket circuit between line and CPC in that socket, and it's 0.06, 0.05. And that's because we've got this link lead in. So the DC current goes down the line all the way through the overcurrent protective device to the bus bar, which is connected via the link lead through the bus bar up to the CPC, up to through the earth bar, and then from the CPC all the way back out to the socket. So we get a circuit. Now, that is another way to carry out your R1, R2 tests. Now, I spoke to Ian just before I did this little film. I spoke to Ian and I said, which way do you teach them? Do you teach them to do each circuit dead test, all the dead tests for each circuit in, one circuit, and then the next circuit, all the dead tests, and then the next circuit, all the dead tests? Or do you link out using a link lead and carry out global tests? Now, he said, I teach individual circuits, but I tell them about both. So let me show you the way that I go about this now.
Commence and dance, left to glance, promote your dance, slide, glide and prance, dances taught me wiggle, take your partner and you hold her, slide and fold her, a little boulder, just work your shoulders, snap your fingers long and all, in the hall, at the ball, that's all.
If I were going about this from C for a C ripper, and I was starting from scratch, my first item I would call to my aid is my link lead, which would go from my bus bar, link my bus bar out with my earth bar. Now, I don't need to take any of those origins out of their overcurrent protective devices. They are left in at the place that they were originally terminated by the constructor of the installation. I can now show the bus bar to the origin of each circuit in turn, or I can show it to all the circuits all at once. So if I were doing my first circuit, I could just close that, or turn it on as it were, turn on my first circuit's overcurrent protective device and carry out my R1, R2 with my probes. There's a lot of swapping round of crocodile clips and probes in the way that Ian says it as well. So there we go. And on to 0.03. Okay. I can then switch that one off if I want and go on to do the R1, R2 from the switch line of my ceiling rows to the CPC of the light circuits, and go between the two switches to find the highest reading. Now, the highest reading in this instance looks to be 0.11. The other reading is 0.09. So I take 0.11 as my R1, R2, the higher of the two readings. Then I go on to my next circuit, which happens to be this switched fused disconnector, 2-pole it's not fused, 2-pole switch. Okay, so I go into the back of that. It's not so easy actually, because of the orientation of these screws, and I get 0.04 there, and so on through. When I get to, I've done all my circuits for the R1, R2, I will then carry out what's called a global insulation resistance test.